Maybe somebody can vamp for me. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome aboard for another episode of Scene and Nerd. This is one of our special segment shows tonight, entitled Harlem Nights, and we're going to be talking about Luke Cage episodes 3 and 4. So, here with me, as always, I have the stalwart Mr. Peter Mora,
What's up?
Nada Mucho, and Mr. David Pecci,
Hey,
and Jonathan Reyes.
Hey, what's up? It's good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you, man. It's pretty awesome. It's like getting the band back together.
Yeah.
So we have all been watching in some form or fashion or another Luke Cage on Netflix, which dropped what I guess is it going into its second week since it's dropped.
Yeah.
yep.
So now, how far has everybody progressed to this point?
To episode 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same.
Okay, nice, just in time delivery. So
I'm in the middle of episode 8.
Okay, all right. So you've looked ahead a bit. I'm still on episode 5. I'm realizing now what an incredibly. When I saw the release date, I thought, "Oh, that's awesome! They're going to drop right before all the CW shows premiere, right?" But of course, uh, because we live in a multifaceted geek world now, there were other things going on in the geek continuum that I hadn't anticipated, like video games. So while it is neat that it dropped just before the CW shows kick back in, I didn't I didn't think far enough ahead to realize that Forza Horizon 3 and Gears of War 4 were coming out. So I have I have struggled to get back to watching Luke Cage because those two games have been high on my priority list to play through. So I have only gotten to episode 5. So
Maybe she's just not hungry. Maybe it's a phase.
so is that me?
Who's watching TV?
Oh, yeah. I'm checking all my browser tabs to make sure it wasn't me. So episode number 3 is kind of the real beginning of the revenge drumbeat, right? So in episode we kind of saw clenched fists and a clear intention to really go down the revenge trail. But it's in episode 3 who's going to take the weight that things really start getting heavy. All right, so um, and the main spiel in this one is that Luke is going to take it to Cottonmouth this episode and uh, and hit him where it hurts, right? So he gets some intel from Chico that informs him where there are various safe houses that where Cottonmouth keeps his money. If you haven't figured it out, spoilers, by the way. I hope I hope that's pretty prominently featured in our title and whatnot. So I hope people understand that it is a review show and we will be going into detail. Um, so at any rate, Luke gets intel from Chico on these various safe houses, and then also finds out that the Crispus Addicts facility, um, which Cottonmouth colloquially refers to as Fort Knox, is where everybody's going to fall back, is where all the money is going to be taken in the event that there's kind of a cataclysmic event. Um, and so Luke kind of in a kind of guerrilla tactic manner, hits some of these smaller safe houses and basically forces Cottonmouth's hand and causes him to pull all the money back to the Crispus Addicts facility. And then Luke just launches an assault on the Crispus Addicts facility, which is a pretty awesome action sequence in its own right. Um, so Dave, overall, what were your feelings on this episode?
I thought they were a lot better than episode 1 and 2 because it was more Luke Cage focused. I thought there was a lot more action, and it just felt a lot more intense. I thought episode 4 was like super good. Sorry, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but episode 3 was really good. And I kind of was starting. I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know the comic series, but I feel like the barbershop's going to become the Heroes for Hire office. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking too, and I don't know if it's thinking or hoping. I mean, I understand the importance to the community of the barbershop, but I also just, want to see that steady progression, right? I've mentioned in my reviews that this is one of the rare shows or movies or pieces or whatever that I've seen that's superhero stuff where I'm not jumping up and down wanting to see them put on the costume because there's not really a Luke Cage costume. But so to me, the next best thing to that is that Heroes for Hire office. So yeah, I'm feeling the same way. Jonathan, how about you? What did you think about the episode?
Yeah, I agree with David. The first 2 episodes didn't do it for me for some reason. I'm still trying to think of why. Because the performances are well done, the show's well done. But I did very much like episode 3 and 4. It started with 3, and then 4 definitely hooked me in for sure. Where
have you watched Daredevil and Jessica Jones?
yeah.
So can you? So in contrast to Luke Cage not grabbing you, can you say what it was about Daredevil and Jessica, just kind of like in their first 3 episodes that you feel did grab you that you feel like you're not seeing in Luke Cage?
With Jessica Jones, it was definitely the villain. I can't think. I forgot his name now. I know it's the purple. Yeah, there we go. Just like the mystery behind it, and just the first episode and how they kind of showed what kind of impact he has without really being on screen yet. That really grabbed me. And then with Daredevil, just the fight sequences. They were some of the most incredibly choreographed things, fight scenes you'll see on TV. You see one of the best ones in episode 2 where it's the hallway scene. I mean, so it has those moments that are just memorable right off the bat. Where I didn't have a memorable moment in Luke Cage until episode 4, where and we'll talk about it as we continue here, but where it was just the whole origin of how he becomes Luke Cage. That's been the most memorable thing for me so far. I was hooked the whole episode. So yeah, I did. Yeah, go ahead.
So you mentioned the villains, in Daredevil and Jessica Jones, and I think that's a key thing to discuss. So you have some of the most seminal villains that exist in the Marvel universe, right? You have Kingpin, and then you have Purple Man, right? I mean, these are 2 villains who definitely approach legendary status, right, as far as villains go in the Marvel universe. And then with Luke Cage, you use Cottonmouth. He's obviously at many thresholds below, right, what those other 2 villains are. Do you think that was deliberate? Do you think it was a conscious choice to not bring in an over-the-top villain at this point in order to further ground this series as kind of an urban, like, hip-hop kind of superhero opera?
Yeah, probably. I would have liked to have seen, knowing that he's the more super of the 3 defenders. I would have liked to have seen, a villain that could match him in some way. I don't know if Luke Cage has that in his gallery of villains, but I would have liked to have seen that, like kind of amp him up, get him, introduce him, say, hey, if you didn't see his cameo on Jessica Jones, this is his abilities. These are his abilities, and then show a threat to in Harlem, or even just maybe expand it or something. And then then they could go head to head. It's just, it feels too grounded right now. Because I feel Luke Cage's abilities, he could just take down Cottonmouth whenever he wants.
Yeah, that's maybe the most interesting thing that I've heard in the whole discussion about Luke Cage is and I think maybe I was working myself around to it in my review so far, but didn't hit on it. But he is theoretically the most powerful, right, of the superheroes that have been shown, in this Netflix Marvel universe to date, and yet he has arguably the weakest villain.
Right.
I actually think that there's probably going to be another villain in there that we haven't seen yet.
Okay.
Because that one guy that came back from the same prison from him, we really don't know if he's got any superpowers. I honestly think that the
Sure.
organization that gave him his superpowers are going to come back into play. So I honestly think that Cottonmouth, I mean, I don't know for sure, might be, dealt with quickly in the first season, and then they might go into the bigger picture, and then the bigger picture gets resolved in season 2.
Okay. Very cool. So, Peter, what were your feelings about episode 3?
It was fine. Just more building up, more story. I gotta say that those fight scenes were really on par with what I come to expect from the Marvel Netflix universe, or not universe, but group of characters, and it didn't disappoint. Though those last scenes, I thought were particularly were particularly cool. Not cool, but story moving. We find out that Scarf is on the take. And then we see an RPG heading right into Genghis Khan's. And episode over.
So it's interesting that everybody has talked about the fight choreography. I actually, or the fight scenes, I actually felt like they were a negative on the show. And this is a show that this is an episode that I rated a 7.5 on the GWW site, and on our 20 increment 10-point scale. And I felt because I felt the two detractions from the show really kept it from being into that category of qualifying as great. One of the problems I have with the fight choreography right now that we're getting into it, and I think we see this play out over into episode 4 is, so Luke Cage, and this is definitely heavy comic book nerd mode right here, right? So Luke Cage is supposed to be capable of lifting 25 tons, punching through 4-inch steel plate. Skin is supposed to be hard as steel. He's supposed to be able to take small caliber, handgun fire at 4 feet, right? So part of my problem is in the portrayal of the show, and I've chalked it up now to the pedigree of them having predominantly dealt with characters who are not as powerful, right? There's and the most distinct example is there's a point. So there's a point where he's walking up the staircase, going into walking up the staircase in the Crispus Attucks assault. He gets shot in the back by a 9mm, like 3 or 4 times, and he winces, he flinches as if he's hurt. But concurrently, in like the same scene, he gets shot at point blank range with shotguns, gets hit from about 10 feet with an assault rifle, several rounds, and doesn't feel a thing. And obviously, however it happened, he was in very close proximity to an RPG shell, right? As we roll into the next episode, and kind of shrugs that off as well. So I feel like they've struggled a little, particularly in episode 3 when these things are first starting to come together, with keeping it consistent. The other problem I had was, again, with his strength, and I think this was just them getting their feet underneath them as far as stunt work goes. There are scenes where he appears to very easily like pick a guy up and throw him upwards into a ceiling. But it seems when he is trying to move people like laterally, like smash them into walls and stuff, you see him struggle a little bit. So again, that could have been a stuntman who just didn't get his weight squared and rolled properly. But but I felt like it was fairly obvious, and it made him look again. It made his strength appear inconsistent, right? He struggled to get a couple guys off of their feet, but then easily wraps a car door around a guy. So so again, I felt like that was just a distraction because it's kind of like the thing I say about art in comics, right? Like it wasn't necessarily bad, but there was enough wrong with it to be distracting, and it kept me from like just sitting there and enjoying that segment of the show. I don't know. Did any of you guys feel like you noticed anything like that?
Well, I interpreted the winces different. I honestly, it looked to me like he was thinking in his head, "Oh crap, another shirt." 'Cause, I mean, dude goes through more shirts than anyone I've ever seen on TV. That was my interpretation. Just like, oh damn it, another shirt. I'm getting tired of replacing my shirts.
So Jonathan, what did you think about the scarf Misty Knight scene, the one in the precinct where Scarf takes this position of, I don't really care if they're operating within the law or not. They're doing something good, overall good, and I'll take whatever help we can get. And Misty kind of takes the very much the kind of the Quentin Lance stance from like the early seasons of Arrow, right? He's kind of like, they're vigilantes, they're not operating within the system, they have no rules and no laws, and we have a process in this country, and they're not authorized to be doing what they do.
With that, I found it interesting because then when you find out that he's a dirty cop, so it was almost like, was he saying that just to cover himself up? But I didn't really think much of it. Well, at first I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. There's actually a character in this universe that actually is okay with them and is within the law. And then you find out that he's within the law but not. And I'm just like, I don't really think much of it. Yeah, I mean, he just kind of falls into that kind of same template of like, oh, it's just another character who's trying to make his way in this tiny world they're in. That's set up for you at least.
Right. And I'm having to kind of go back in time and kind of think of, try and think of what I thought, not knowing what I would know later. And, I just remember that scene being like, I was completely on board with Scarf at that point. He Frank Whaley had kind of, at that point in the series, I felt like kind of been a lackluster actor. I felt like they really hadn't given him enough to kind of spread his wings, and I felt like that was kind of the turning point in the show where now he was really engaging and kind of adding a little more than he had been. And at least at that point, until like you guys said 2 minutes later, I was like, go Scarf, right? I mean, I was
yeah, exactly.
I appreciated that. I didn't really know how to feel about Misty Knight when she got all religious about well, they shouldn't be helping, they don't have training, and I was like, oh, here we go again. But I was very heavily pro Scarf, and actually it was kind of like the over voltage, right before they tripped the generator offline. They kind of ramped you up, and maybe we're trying to make you feel positive about him, and then kind of kicked your feet out from underneath you in the next scene where he quite skillfully takes his tie from around his neck and then uses it to choke.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty awesome. Dave, what did you feel about Alfre Woodard scenes in the show?
You're talking about the white detective, right?
No, Alfre Woodard, the councilwoman.
Oh, okay, her. I don't really have a strong opinion on her. I think that, she has good intentions for the city, but she doesn't care where the money comes from to change the city.
Yeah, this was another episode where I felt like she kind of brought the show down. She just had like a whole string, that whole scene with her and Cottonmouth on the bench, across from the Christmas Addicts facility. I felt like she had a string of just really awkward lines. The "I'm always ready, baby," it just came off very horribly. There's a string of things she mentions in there where Cottonmouth tells her, that's just a cover, it's just a front, it's always been that way. Whatever it is that you're working on, it's just an illusion. We know that it's not real in comparison to the application of real power. And I think she kind of played up the idealism, and the blindness to thinking that all the illegal things she was doing were okay because they were for the greater good, just a little too innocently, and it just came off very much like a high school, kind of kid, which is just very kind of jarring for somebody of Alfre Woodard's age. So like I said, I scored that episode a 7.5. It was kind of a shade above mediocre, but not strong enough to reach greatness. So let's go on and move on to episode 4. Peter, were you able to kind of recall and give a rundown on what happened in this episode, and kind of give us how you felt about it?
Yeah. So this is the episode where they really start to give you some background on who Luke Cage was before he was Luke Cage. Where he kind of came from, as far as his superhero origin story. I guess I would say. It gets into where he met his wife Reba, and it all happens in flashback while he's slowly trying to carefully dig himself and his landlady, Miss Lynn, out of the rubble from the RPG that old Cottonmouth shot, laughing. As a general rundown, there you go. I actually rather enjoyed this episode. It's the one I've been waiting for since starting to watch the series, because I knew a little bit about Cage's background, but I wanted to see how they would address it. Where did he come from? Why was he in prison? They really haven't addressed why he's in prison yet. Just that he was, he was basically blackmailed into a illegal fighting ring in the prison. He was just beating people up and getting hurt, and like always, he had to do the right thing and ended up on the wrong side of a beating. And his future wife manages to convince one of the doctors who's performing experiments, which they actually do go into a little bit of, to try and save his life. So overall, I thought this was really kind of a fascinating episode, and really gave us a different, little more clear picture.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. The one thing that I also liked about that episode was it kind of brought up something that I had studied in college, was about the privatization of prisons. And like the big one that you see in the Midwest is I think called Prison Corp of America. And it's kind of kind of very similar, that people don't like them because they have to find some other way of making profit than just running a prison. So in reality, Prison Corp of America, the conditions for the prisons are not as good as state-run prisons, and they and just kind of very similar with Seagate is that, they're probably just to keep afloat this private prison, they conduct these experiments from it's not, we don't know for sure why Seagate, is conducting these experiments, but for sure that, they're making profit from doing these experiments.
So Jonathan, we've mentioned a couple of negative things with regard to Cottonmouth as the villain, and I have mentioned on a couple of occasions that I feel like Alfre Woodard is kind of an awkward cog in this. Neither of them are present in this episode. Do you think that helped?
Yes. I really liked how it focused just on Luke Cage. It kind of almost felt like the
Give him a moment.
Oh man, sometimes he comes back, sometimes he doesn't.
Yeah. But going on his tangent, I would agree that this was very much a Luke Cage focused episode, and I did appreciate that because it gave me time to digest the rest of the story and also learn a little bit more about Mr. Cage and his wife.
Right. So Dave, I had a hard time nailing down when in time this was. Did you feel the same way? And if so, did that negatively impact your take on the episode?
You mean that, like, how far in the past are we talking? Is that what you're referring to?
Right.
I feel like it must have been like a late 80s or 90s thing.
So yeah, so you kind of had the same thing I did, but maybe you didn't let yourself get all twisted up about it. So right, it looks. I mean, just from the look of things, including when he gets, so they do a nod to the '80s Power Man costume, which was the yellow disco shirt, blue trousers, brown boots, and a chain around his waist for a belt. So it makes it feel very much like late '70s, early '80s, right?
Awesome nod to one of his costumes, by the way.
Yeah, that was awesome. But then there's a point where he has a sidekick in the prison called Squabbles. Great name, by the way. I love Squabbles. And they're talking about women, and he mentions Beyonce. Now that caused me to put my finger on a timeline that has this happening around 2003.
No, Beyonce was around in the 90s, right?
No. I mean, well,
not as Beyonce.
Right.
It wasn't Queen Bee. It was her group, Destiny's Child.
And I even think Destiny's Child was a 2000 launch. But yeah, definitely Beyonce's initial solo album was 2003, and she really wasn't referred to, right, by her first name, outside of there being a discussion about Destiny's Child. So yeah, I struggled to kind of fix in my head when in time this took place.
So maybe it is early 2000s then.
Destiny's Child started up around 1990, and they became a little more popular 96 to 99. So
right.
I think he grabbed a woman's shirt.
Yeah.
I think he was running around with a blouse on. That's what it looked like to me.
I think you're right.
So Jonathan, I'm glad that you made it back. We've kind of been vamping while you've been gone, but so Jonathan, so we have this character introduced of Squabbles in the prison, who unfortunately also meets his demise, much in the same way Pops did, and in episode 3 we get introduced to Fish. So there's this coalescing of kind of morally driven characters, Pop, Fish, Squabbles, that kind of represent this kind of poetic humanitarian backstory, right, to the superhero action and the fight of good versus evil. Um, do you feel like that's a deliberate that is deliberate and an essential part of the story, and is it something you enjoy or have even picked up on? Because I don't know, um, if it's deliberate. The question is it so subtle that it's not even getting to people that it's a relevant part of the story?
Yeah. I feel like because it's set in Harlem, I want to make it a point that like people have someone of there or to like better themselves. But if you think of the other Marvel series in Daredevil and Jessica Jones, there is that kind of mentor, kind of guardian angel, kind of voice of reason, where you have the priest for Matt Murdock.
Yeah.
It's Trish, right? I think Trish is her name.
Yeah.
So all these characters have somebody. Luke, in this case, had Pop, and then Squabs in his back prison days, and then actually, you can even think of Rosario Dawson's the Night Nurse character as well when he was on Jessica Jones. I guess it's kind of like because there are more grounded versions of these characters, so it's almost like trying to reassure them that they're doing the right thing, or in Luke Cage's case, trying to get him to that point to say it's okay to be yourself. And with Jessica, I think it was almost like accepting what happened to her and to kind of embrace it and to be doing better for others, to actually help others who have dealt with the same situation. Matt, I think it was trying to get out from underneath just what happened to him, obviously with being blinded, but having his past with his father and things. So I like that aspect. It works. In Luke Cage, it hasn't worked for me yet. Where it did work was with Pops. I loved that. Was some of my favorite interactions was between them two. It hasn't worked. It didn't really. I kind of liked it with Squabs a little bit, but it was so short lived that it didn't stick. But I was kind of upset that Pops was knocked off early and quick, because I really liked their interaction and what he brought to the table as an actor as well on screen.
Well, it's kind of funny. Did you say Squabbles got off so quick? I mean, I get it. I completely understand what you're saying, but
Yeah.
If you quantify that
Yeah.
metrically, right? We're saying Squabbles got knocked off early because he got killed in one episode.
Yeah.
In comparison to Pops's like super long run of longevity, which was 2 episodes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those things, right? They move very quickly in these 13 episode shortened seasons, and we believe that these, I'll call them the kind of the the British TV format, right, of compacting everything to these shorter seasons is good. But you get a lot of that, right? My wife and I were big fans of Downton Abbey, but you have to get your mind wrapped around the fact that with 13 episodes covering a whole era of a country, right? That in that 13 episode season, sometimes there's a few months that transpire between like one episode to the other. So it's just an interesting dynamic, from both positive and negative. So we need to go ahead and wrap and get out of here to do our very brief GWW weekly talk. So I'll leave out with asking each of you: do you have any conspiracy theories about Reba?
Oh. I'm gonna say no. But it'll be interesting. I'm glad they're actually showing her as a character, because she was mentioned in Jessica Jones a ton, and you kind of just saw her, and I was always interested to know more about her, because it was so key, that image of her, and she's mentioned all the time. So it's just nice to finally see her and to see her as an actual physical character. So to get to know more of her backstory and even his backstory too, with her being there, I'm really looking forward to watching more.
Okay, Peter, any conspiracy theories about Reba?
Honestly, I think she's exactly what she seems to be. So I really don't have any conspiracies about her. I'm I'm hoping this isn't the last we see of her because I like her character, and in the flashbacks, and I'd like to see a little bit more about her character, learn a little bit more in depth about how she's involved and
Cool.
all that.
Cool. Dave, how about you?
None. Yeah, I just think she is who she is.
So you guys are gonna make me out to be the tinfoil hat guy. So what I find is, so there's a few things I find interesting in this episode, right? One might just be a matter of cheap production, cost cutting objectives. The super soldier tank that Power Man is immersed in to get him his powers is very, 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 very similar to the Wolverine tank in
Thought of
in
that
X-Men 2.
immediately. Yep.
Yeah.
I was thinking the Deadpool tank.
They all kind of eerily look the same, and maybe scientists in the Marvel universe have gotten tunnel vision about recreating the super soldier formula, and they're only taking one approach to it. So maybe I kind of feel like those tanks are something you can order on like the Marvel version of Amazon. So that was one, but then so we see near the end of the episode that Reva goes in and wipes his criminal record. I think I'm assuming his public record, his identity, because she tells him immediately afterward he can just choose a new name, and I guess she'll be able to spool up documents for him. That is not like GLG level 3 security clearance, right? That's like super high. And then she also mentions that she has not always been a prison psychologist. So even though this is a world where these crossovers do not happen, my conspiracy theory that I'm spinning is that I think she is a former SHIELD agent.
Oh.
Right, because you've got Misty Knight in there, who I think was a SHIELD agent at some point. So yeah, that's my theory. That may be the way to make it all like connected, or worse.
Yeah.
We have Hammer Industries involved, so it's also feasible. I say SHIELD, but AIM and Hydra are also possibilities. But I feel like she's a former SHIELD agent, or maybe even current. So
I like it.
all right. Well, thanks so much, everybody, for joining in. We're going to go ahead and get out of here. If any of you are interested in catching up with us in social media, you can catch Mr. Peter Morrow at Edrickson_Tarot on Twitter. You can catch Dave Pecci at comicbookguy90 on Twitter, and you can catch Jonathan Reyes at Wordy Nerdy on Twitter. And you can follow myself at Agashly Stamus on Twitter also. So thanks so much for joining in. That is a wrap on SNN special segment 2 of Harlem Nights. We will be back next week with segment 3 covering Luke Cage episodes 5 and 6. Thanks very much. We are out of here.